So let me welcome everyone here, and we're very excited to introduce you to this wonderful group of speakers, and looking forward to hearing from everyone who wants to participate. So for now, let me just say briefly that I am Joelle Danant, and I'm the Program Director for the Sustainable Design Certificate Program. And I'm very happy to introduce our moderator for today's session, and I will let Carolyn Shafer, our moderator, I will let her introduce everyone else on the panel. So let me introduce you to Carolyn for now. Carolyn is the Sustainability Director for Academic Affairs at Pratt Institute. She runs the Pratt Sustainability Center, formerly called the Center for Sustainable Design Strategies. Carolyn is the chair of the Pratt Sustainability Committee and the chair of the Departmental Sustainability Coordinators. She also teaches life cycle assessment in the Sustainable Environmental Systems program at Pratt. So welcome everyone, and I'm going to let Carolyn continue for us. And I'm realizing I'm hesitating between Caroline and Carolyn, but I think it's Carolyn, and so my apologies if I said Caroline.
No problem. Yes. Well, welcome everyone. We're so delighted to have you all join us, especially on a Friday night. I get it's COVID and we can't really go out as we normally would, but it's really an honor to have you all participate in almost wrapping up a week of just incredible programming for Pratt Earth Action Week. Before we begin today's session, I just have a few announcements to make about Pratt Earth Action Week. So we began this past Monday, September 21st, and our final events wrap up tomorrow. There is a community cleanup social media call for action, as well as a jam session tomorrow evening. All of that information can be found at our main Eventbrite page. And I also wanted to call your attention to the amazing student work exhibit that is available at the Pratt Sustainability Center's website, which is just sustainabilitycenter.pratt.edu. It's a virtual showcase of Pratt student work from all of the schools, and it's a reflection of the current and relevant issues surrounding our theme for this week, race, health, and climate. So I'm very excited to welcome our wonderful panel at this evening's presentation. We have 4 faculty and 2 alumni from the certificate program. Kat Choate, who's a visiting professor at Pratt, Joelle Danant, who just did our introduction. She's a program director and visiting instructor at Pratt's SCPS. Megan Dwyer, graduate of the SDC program. Alison, Irvine, visiting instructor at Pratt. Elizabeth Lee, another graduate of the SDC program. Tetsu Ohara, who's adjunct associate professor in the interior design program, School of Design, and Dan Penge, who is visiting instructor at Pratt Institute. And so this evening, just so you can sort of understand our run of show, we're going to have a couple of presentations by our panelists, and then we'll have an opportunity to ask the panel a few questions. And because there is such a large group, which I'm delighted to see, I would ask that you please write your questions in the chat. Feel free to do so during the panel, and then at the end of all 3 presentations, I will help sort of facilitate the conversation and read some of the questions aloud, just so that we can sort of facilitate such a large group. And yeah. I'm very excited, so I would like to turn things over to Kat and Dan to kick things off. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you, Carolyn. All right, so I guess we'll start by introducing ourselves a little bit. I'm Kat, as Carolyn introduced me. I graduated from Pratt in the architecture program. And now, by day, I'm a visualization artist, rendering products and buildings for architects and designers. By night, I'm either creating what my partner and I call design fiction, together imagining sustainable futures and illustrating them, and teaching as well. Sometimes I try to sleep. Dan, how about you?
Thanks, everyone. Glad to be here. My background is industrial design. My 9-to-5 role is as a material research specialist, where I help architects and interior designers to specify building materials. By moonlight, my time is dedicated to Pratt, teaching in this program. Currently, I'm also engaged in a pioneership program with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Together, Kat and I co-teach. We teach 3 courses together. If you want to move this slide ahead. We teach 3 courses together in the Sustainable Design Certificate Program. The first of which is the Sustainable Design Foundation course. It's the prerequisite for all other courses in the program, where we discuss the key principles of sustainability, and students learn a little bit about the design process. We discuss vocabulary, composition, and narrative, and many other items. It's kind of a packed class. Students will also develop research and portfolio skills. In the second course, Sustainable Process and Materials, we base the thinking in systems and cover evaluative tools and strategies, ultimately discussing the human material relationship through a product life cycle perspective. And lastly, the Sustainable Design Theory and Practice course. It's an interdisciplinary studio environment where students acknowledge the role of the designer as a change agent and begin their own design journey as we walk them through the steps. Students expand upon their representation, modeling, and visualization skills with an emphasis on portfolio development. Okay, move to the next. So the students. Our students come from a variety of backgrounds and with varying ambitions. The program is unique in that way, where we invite all design disciplines. We've taught working professionals with engineering, advertising, UX design, jewelry design, fine arts experience, just to list a few. Kat and I strongly believe that these past studies are an important asset, both to any future design endeavors that they may pursue and to other students in the classroom. They can learn from each other. This presents an interesting, ever-evolving challenge for us, of course, but it is always fun. So our methods really include starting class off by learning about our students and assessing their existing knowledge. We really care about student comfort in our courses, and we found that they perform better when they're able to easily engage with us and each other. It's why we've structured the course to be tailored by each individual. They're invited to solve a problem they care about and or aligns with their personal and professional goals. Establishing relationships with and among the students is also just a lot of fun. They're able to build a small network, and there's always enjoyment in creating together and undertaking a common mission. In class, we're always unraveling, trying to understand the core issues and ensuring students can make those connections on their own. Much of the work that we do in class is about course correction. We help students by identifying common misconceptions, especially because the word sustainability is vague and can be easily muddled. So we provide them with specific vocabulary and the know-how to use language that they're already familiar with to discuss complicated considerations. We provide criteria and framework to assess how a solution addresses what we call the quadruple bottom line, which is a deliberate analysis of people, planet, profit, and we throw in time. Essentially, we provide clarity in understanding that ultimately the goal is about thriving balance.
So one of the most important tools to achieve that is inquiry. Very rarely will we just tell students the answers to problems. We try to give them the tools to investigate that themselves and to consider the wide range of possibilities they can pursue. There's lots to learn everywhere. In this example, a student chose to research and analyze a sweater which she had owned for her whole life, passed down from her mother, and she learned about all of the processes, inputs and outputs involved in creating the garment and maintaining it. and found a solution to create new garments, which is more sustainable in the process. Another important tool that we teach in our class is communication, both verbally to communicate with each other, with possible future employers, other designers, both verbally and visually. Not only do we teach them the language to express their ideas, but also how to draw them. The design process can be very vulnerable to share your work and your decision-making with others, so that's another important part of creating a comfortable environment, we feel, so that students, aren't afraid to explore and test things out and, create exciting work. Another big part of what we teach is considering all of the factors in a design and understanding that people, planet, profit, and time are all connected when you're trying to create a sustainable design. The students need to be able to understand others' perspectives and how that goes into creating a solution, as well as understanding what's important to them and how to make decisions based on that. After class, we maintain relationships with students. Students will frequently reach out to us with questions about new projects they're working on, possibly asking for recommendations, advice for future education, or, just checking in and seeing what's new with the program. So that's one of the best parts. We say that we can't do this alone, and in creating the network through this program, we know that we aren't. That's it for us.
Wonderful. All right. So hello, everybody. It is so wonderful to be here tonight. My name is Alison Irvine. I'm an artist, scientist, and educator. I teach the BioDesign Lab intensive course here at Pratt, and my colleague Daniel Trophy also teaches the BioDesign Lab course in the fall and spring. So my personal background, just to give a bit about me, bridges the world of art, design, and science. So like my colleagues, I wear many hats. I currently work as a science writer for Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and I'm also a founding organizer and board member of the BioDesign Challenge, which is an education program and competition that fosters collaborations between art, design, and science students to envision the future of biotechnology. So I'd like to take just a few minutes to share more about the field of biodesign quickly, tell you more about the course, and then share a few examples of student work. So quickly, to go over what is biodesign. So that's a great question because it encompasses so many things. The way I define it is the practice of designing using living organisms. So you can think of these organisms as your collaborators. And when you work with them, it invites you to think beyond, current products and waste streams and consider the effects on the whole ecosystem. And when we look into thriving ecosystems, we can see that there's really no such thing as waste. What's a byproduct from one organism is fuel for the next. So when we're creating these biodesigns, we're thinking about what's the life cycle of the product, what resources are we using, where do they come from, how do they break down, and then more importantly, how can we use this knowledge to promote a more sustainable practices throughout lots of different industries. And the concept of biodesign isn't new. Organisms such as bacteria and yeast already do so much for us, from fermenting our favorite foods to creating fragrances. They've really enabled us to create kind of factories at a large scale. So the kind of premise of my course is asking, what if these organisms could do more? What if they could grow our buildings, our furniture, our clothes? So these are some of the questions that we talk about. So within the course, we delve into the exciting world of biomaterials. So students have the opportunity to work hands-on with materials such as SCOBY, which stands for Symbiotic Colony of Bacteria and Yeast, which if anyone has had a kombucha, you will see something small floating at the bottom, and that is the colony of bacteria and yeast consuming the sugar and creating cellulose as a byproduct. And we love cellulose. We use it in so many things. And then after this material is grown, it can be dried and turned into a leather of sorts and treated and then turned into some other products. And students also have the opportunity to work with mycelium, which is the vegetative structure of mushrooms. They can make molds for mycelium and turn them into bricks or building materials and treat them and experiment with them. And the goal of kind of being introduced to these two materials is to really get a hands-on knowledge of what it's like to work with organisms, because it's sometimes a learning curve. So students are able to then pursue working with these materials and more on their own. So within the course, I hope that I can do justice for myself and Danielle. So students we want students to understand the role and perspective of different disciplines within emerging fields of biodesign. We want them to gain a knowledge of contemporary issues relating to climate change and sustainability, scope complex challenges, develop early stage biodesign concepts, evaluate products and processes using life cycle assessment tools, and then finally being able to create prototypes using these materials. So like some of these past students that I'm showing right here, some of their projects where you're designing everyday products for with compostable biomaterials, or looking at how bacterial cellulose can aid in wound healing, building, and then creating products from waste streams. You can explore these concepts within the BioDesign Lab course. And lastly, I wanted to point out to make sure to go look at the online gallery page that is showing some work. This is one of my students' projects from last summer. So definitely check it out to read more. Thank you.
Great, and Tetsu, I think you're up.
Unmute. I should unmute myself. Hello, my name is Tetsu Ohara. I will try to engage with our title of our panel discussion as much as we can to see how my course that I teach brings some level of optimism or positive energy into the course. Let's see. Here's my statement, my teaching experience and definition for sustainability in general. I've been teaching since 2007, and some of the courses that we're going to highlight, it's taught both at the School of Design and School of Continuing Professional Studies, is the biomimicry. So I'll talk about the biomimicry class today. In it, there are 3 different levels of biomimicry. It's not just mimicking the shapes and forms, just the look of things or color and patterns, but we try to bring it down to 3 different levels. And these are the words or some of the simplified terminologies to maybe describe how we can translate these level 1, 2, 3s into a design context. One is natural forms, 2-dimensional in some ways, the patterns, the sequence, the numbers. And then level 2 is the natural processes. How do they make? How do they grow? How do they hold together? What are the materiality? What's the structural integrity. And then level 3 is to mimic the ecosystem itself and looking into how it gives back. It has this, the nature has a way of organizing itself, and there's no waste. And so we're trying to mimic that. And how do we do that in the human world is a little bit of a challenge, but we tend to dig into life cycle analysis, some sort of social responsibility or contribution or wellness of humans as well as other things. First thing is important to identify the challenge before we go into dive into the world of biology, because we're designers or problem solvers, so we want to have the design challenge, and that it is important to select the right issue that you can handle and analyze its environment, pinpoint the cause of that problem that can be solved by biomimicry. Those are the steps. And what it really comes down to, these are examples of some of the students' work from last year, is that let's identify an issue. In this case is a food waste. And that happens everywhere in many different types of vegetables or fruits. And how is it happening? Where is it happening the most? And let's try to find out what are the actual issues, not just the percentage of the waste. When does that occur in the life cycle? Is it harvesting? Is it transportation? Is it maintenance? And all these things become a part of the ingredients to be examined. And here's another student work. Megan is here with us today. And she talked about capturing the fog. And then looked into different sites because the drought is a problem everywhere. And a good thing is to be able to look into a site analysis of the climate, topography, daylighting, temperature gauge, precipitation. All these kind of things matter, right? Where, altitude, and all these things. And as you search these kind of facts, and then there are other things that emerge. What's really exciting about it is that, well, and also disturbing, is that you find things evolving around that issue. She found that 80% of conflict in rural areas are about water, but people who are at the risk is the women and young children. So the plot gets deeper. It starts to culminate many aspects of things, not just location, not just water or tomato, but who are involved? What are some of the human exchange, or what can we improve? And so that's the identifying the challenge, the subject matter of the thesis. And then we seek answers from the nature, and we ask nature. And literally there is a website called asknature.org. And in the plain language, biomimicry is a practice that learns from and mimics the strategies found in nature to solve human design challenges and find hope along the way. I think it's a very suitable for today's panel discussion, is because there's something really fantastic about what has happened on Earth in the last 13.8 billion years of time. So if you are to compare our Homo sapien life form in the calendar of 1 year, it really nearly calculates as 1/5 of a second. And all these times, many things has happened on planet Earth, and but the Earth itself, species and evolution has brought all kinds of tested patterns and strategies that we can learn from. That's an exciting part, because we don't have to reinvent something. It's already been tested on Earth. So why don't we learn from other species or nature? Sometimes it's not only biomimicry, but geomimicry as well. And when we ask nature, there's a kind of a way of breaking down things in the category. We use this map to be able to identify. So it's this somewhere that we dive into a little bit deeper, obviously. But in this case, subgroup of attachment. So there are many different species, animals, reptiles, plants, have a way of being able to engage with the surface or attach sections, being able to peel, being able to sustain an incredible amount of force that is happening in the seawater, crushing waves. And there are many different examples, and I don't have time to share everything, but this is about managing strength or impact. The woodpecker. Isn't it amazing how long that tongue is? Did you know that? So it's not just an efficiency of the beak and the being able to have the skull attachment to see how you can take on the impact. We can look into that. There are other species that we can find the calcium and protein layer of abalone shells. I mean, it's really incredible. Nature makes this thing. And that we don't have to heat, beat, and treat like the Industrial Revolution to make everything. Maybe we can learn how things are done in a natural way without any carbon footprints or anyway. And then so after the students get a little bit more exposure to the biomimicry, then we get to tackle the solutions, and we provide sustainable solutions, contribute. And what's really important here is that we're not just serving the rich and the small. Our course tends to pay a closer attention to the people in need, the crises that brings some of the people that trickles down, that being the recipient of major issues. We want to help as many people as possible. So it's a very inclusive approach to trying to help something. And then you identify the location, and we try to look into a climate-specific solution. Sometimes looking into precedent studies of indigenous habitat, material use. In these cases, we're using a cricket as a ventilator. When you dissect and look into anatomy, it starts to reveal. Cacti has its own way of trying to thermal regulate by having these bumps. The heated area to the crevice of the shadowed area starts to rise and control temperature. Snail being able to ventilate air in. The pods have its own way of protecting something. So all these things that are able to, in this case, protect and maximize the longevity of the tomato. And this is something that doesn't require a high tech. It's very low tech. Somebody who doesn't, when things break or when people are making and producing, anybody can teach each other. Or it's the way the local materials that are found. And in some ways that it's teachable. And of course, we get into prototyping and so on and so on. But what's really interesting about the proposal itself is that it's not just trying to maintain the food waste or reduce the amount of food waste, but maybe there's a way of helping the local economy. There's a whole business model that we talk about it. And something that it's easy for local people to teach each other so that they can trickle down those information. So it's not some kind of a high gadget thing that you have to hire somebody, that it could be done in rural, non-grid, off-grid areas. These are some very exemplifying students' work. Megan's work I talked about briefly about being able to harvest the fog into the water in a very drought area. The team Fire paid attention to how to filter smoke during wildfire in Australia. Cool Cape, Elizabeth Lee talked about cooling down, and it's something wearable that you can use to cool your body down in a very hot heat in Georgia. You can also use as a drinking source. Floating aquaculture proposal by Colleen. Plastic waste control by Erica Pontes. And even the ladies' shelter, they're calling the blooming shelter. It's a menstrual hut. It's something that people don't talk about. But there's always a way of helping the people in need and identifying the problem. So it's really exciting and exhilarating to think that we can attempt to solve various global challenges remotely and hopefully being able to help hundreds of thousands of people from here as a designer, because we're here to provide the solution to the challenges. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I just, on a personal note, I've had the pleasure of sitting in on the sort of midterm or mid-course and final reviews for a lot of these courses. And the work is just astounding, especially thinking about how, especially over the summer sessions, how condensed the time is, and the depth at which these projects get to is always really blows me away. So yes, I was wondering, so please feel free, those are all of the sort of formal presentations we have. For anyone who has questions, please do feel free to enter them into the chat. And while we're doing that, I was actually hoping that Liz and Megan could maybe take a moment to introduce themselves and explain, just sort of representing alums of the program, explain a bit about why you were attracted to the program in the first place and what your background was, because I know many of the students come from a design background, but many of them don't as well, and how you've maybe applied some of what you learned from the program to whatever it is that you're doing now, or hope to if you haven't figured out how to apply it yet.
Who's going to go first? Megan, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll go. So I'm Megan Dwyer. I have a career background in advertising, doing brand strategy, focusing a lot on figuring out consumer insights, working with a lot of corporate clients, doing market research, and what drew me into this program, and I continue to get so much from it every single day, is the wanting to take that discipline of trying to uncover and solve problems for corporate clients, and using those skills to solve problems for climate change or inequality, really serving people with things with solutions that can really help their lives versus working mostly in advertising where you're trying to sell products to a consumer. So taking those same skills, but hopefully using them to solve problems that I think are more important and more meaningful and just need to be solved now. So that was kind of my draw into the program. And what I've been able to do slowly is take my background in communications using more verbal, trying to use a lot more of my visual learning from the course to cut through and show my solutions in a different way, as well as working with clients who a lot now have sustainability in their remit, but the ones who don't, just really making sure that that's woven into every single decision step. Really thinking about, that quadruple bottom line, bringing that into strategic planning further up the pipeline so that it's not an add-on or greenwashing. And, sometimes the projects, are dreams and have sustainability baked right in. Sometimes it's just a learning opportunity to have a client look at solving a problem in a different way and look at the different inputs, usually ones that they're not on the top of their mind. Profit is usually there, like check, 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 but not always people, planet, and time. So just bringing that in and using that as an educational aspect for current clients has been really helpful.
Well, Megan and I actually have a very similar background. I think a lot of the students I was with in my classes had very different backgrounds, but it was very interesting when I met Megan because we have kind of similar challenges and goals for what we wanted to get out of the course. I also have a background in advertising, communication strategy, and have been working for years trying to get people to change their behavior in order to buy more things. And I think started the program out of a frustration with that goal, first of all, and also a frustration with the skill set that I had being restricted to communications rather than more systems-based thinking. So I think I was looking for the program to give me not only skills to propose more holistic solutions to some of the problems I was seeing, but also maybe the arguments that I could take back to do things differently and more sustainably. And ultimately deciding whether it's even an industry that I want to engage with anymore, or if my skill set is better used elsewhere. And I think since taking the course, the one thing that Kat and Dan, we talked about at the beginning was that you don't just need the hard skills, you also need the soft skills of communication. And I thought that was something that was very interesting as I took the courses to see, you know, what role does storytelling have to play as well as design, or alongside design, or as part of design, to help people understand and engage with more sustainable options in a way that doesn't feel like it is greenwashing, or it is luxury, or it is a choice or an opt-in. And so I've been trying to take that back to work every day, and I think it's an uphill battle. We'll see where I go with it from here. I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because, you know, you bring up the concept of greenwashing, which I think especially in sort of the ad agency side of things, we see a lot. I'm watching commercials on the television right now that really exemplify that in not a great way. And something that came up in a panel last night was this, you know, the idea of greenwashing, but also now as we're seeing these intersecting crises across health and social and racial justice, as well as sustainability, and that really these things are all interrelated. You know, this idea of woke washing also. And so, you know, it really, I think that obviously the theme of this week, but really what's just, I mean, in the news continuously is really bringing to the forefront how relevant these conversations are through, you know, to a myriad of different disciplines and people with different backgrounds. And I think one of the things that this program offers is the ability for various people from various backgrounds to come and plug into that. So I think sort of opening it up to the rest of the panel, thinking about how we can make this the field of sustainable design, but specifically, you know, this like snapshot that you guys have during this very intense program, how can we make sustainability more inclusive, and to think not just in sort of the traditional sense of inclusivity, but thinking sort of on the human-centric side, so thinking of diverse people and communities, but also at a larger scale, inclusive of all living things and all sustainability issues that maybe don't always come to the forefront of mind when we hear the word sustainability. I think oftentimes it sort of leans to the environmental, but really what the summer has revealed is that it is so much deeper than that and so much more complicated. Not that environmental sustainability isn't already very complicated. So I was curious, you know, from the perspective of both of our faculty and our alum, and anybody else who's out there, you know, if you have thoughts on this.
I'd like to speak to that, actually. You know, we agree absolutely that justice and equality are sustainability issues and can't be ignored in connection to, you know, some of the problems we're trying to address. They're all related, right? I hadn't heard the term woke washing, but I'm going to remember that one. We
I hadn't either, and it really,
yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, that happens, especially right now.
Absolutely. So we talked about greenwashing, but we'll add that in too. I want to say that an enormous part of a designer's job isn't just proposing solutions, but listening. And I think that's probably the most important aspect in terms of trying to make sustainable design more inclusive, right? Marginalized people know what they need, and it's not a designer's job to tell them what they need, but to listen and to try to help them to achieve that. Another aspect is, with design, it can become complicated with sustainable design because a lot of sustainable practices were actually invented by Black and Indigenous people of color. And we have to be careful not to just take those ideas and commodify them and sell them and take credit for them, but to acknowledge where they come from and give credit and compensation to those people as well.
That is such a great point, Kat. I actually kind of, as I was thinking about this question, I was kind of considering some similar points. But just, yeah, as designers, we make things for people to use, and people might be from different backgrounds or a different culture with different needs. So I feel like it's our responsibility to do the work to be inclusive, both in our syllabi as we're teaching, on panels, on projects. And like you mentioned, it's not that some other communities aren't actively engaged in sustainability. We have so much to learn from Indigenous people who, where it's part of the culture to act as stewards for the land. So I was kind of thinking about this question and turning it around and thinking, like, instead of saying how can we include diverse people and communities, how can we bring resources to people who are already solving these problems? Yeah, as just maybe something to think about.
Can I say something? I want to connect this to my question.
You can follow up with your.
Yeah, that was. Thank you,
Yeah.
Carolyn. Hi, everybody. I am Leonel Ponce. I coordinate the Master of Science in Sustainable Environmental Systems at Pratt, and we're actually at that nexus of design, policy, science, and then also environmental justice. As part of the Graduate Center for Planning and Environment, we work closely with New York City, but other frontline communities as well, and actually work with them as clients in the long term. And so I think there are many opportunities to work at various scales that we in our program, maybe some of our students do, but we in our program as faculty don't have as much expertise in, especially at the product scale. That could be really interesting to then, let me follow up with the question. Do you have potential? Do you see potential for this program, this continuing education program that has a limited time and isn't really typically working with students that are continuing through at Pratt, but could? Do you see a potential for it to be more closely connected to the other sustainability courses and programs at Pratt? Is there a potential to maybe connect projects across from this program into other programs or into other initiatives that are ongoing? How do you see this could happen? Has this happened before in your experience?
Can I just interject very briefly? Thank you so much, Lionel, for speaking. So for those who might have arrived late, I'm the program director of the Sustainable Design Certificate Program in the Continuing Education School of Continuing and Professional Studies. And Lionel, you are one of the teachers, in addition to being, in the School of Architecture, you also teach the Sustainability by Design course. It's a 3-credit, all institute elective credit summer intensive in the summer. And I'm happy that you're talking about collaboration, because I would love to see, this kind of collaboration, like you mentioned. So thank you.
So, yeah, thank you, Joelle. And yeah, I think something that I did bring into that classroom is having a community client as a client for the students, which made it a little bit tougher in that setting. But that's also because we kind of inserted that process into just that, 10-week window. But I'm wondering if you all have had an experience with a community client, or think that that's something you'd be interested in, or even just connecting with, say, industrial design or foundations. Just wondering.
We haven't really had an experience with that yet, but it's a really intriguing opportunity. And I would be very excited to pursue something along those lines. You know, getting a sponsor to do work with us would mean that the work is going out in the real world and you know, is maybe not so theoretical, which is, you know, something that is very exciting and a core goal of, you know, the certificate program is to see action. So 100%, like let's make this happen.
Agree. We have had a handful of students who were primarily focused on trying to find ways to improve their own communities and find sustainable ways to, you know, make their communities better. And, you know, we could help them as individuals try to find ways to do that, but we haven't had the opportunity to actually engage with a project that has a physical result like that. So I'd be very interested too.
Yeah, just from a student perspective too, like when the classes end, you're not necessarily have made that career jump. Like Liz and I were actually lucky enough to get together, social distanced, and just kind of stay connected. But there is a longing to continue to stay connected to Pratt, as well as to have an opportunity to work on a real life problem, especially one within our own community after, you know, COVID has come in and left New York so vulnerable. You know, I could see a lot of students really be engaged in a kind of real life project going forward. I don't know how you would do the mechanics of that, but I think there would be a lot of interest for students current or students who've already gone through the program to keep going and see if they can use these skills to actually solve a problem in a local community. That would be great.
Yeah, well, I'll leave it at that. And I know that Tetsu's students work a lot with communities internationally in the way that is possible within that setting. So I don't know, Tetsu, if you want to speak to that, but I think it behooves us as educators and students to try and participate as much as possible in the real world. I'm glad that everybody's on board. Great. And great work, everybody. This is amazing.
Another way to organize. Oh, okay. Yeah, I spoke way too long, I think, for the presentation.
No, please go. We've got.
I will refrain from.
No, please, Tetsu. Finish your thought. I think this is really great.
In the way that I like to think is that the direct, immediate connection with the community at hand around in, let's say, the 718, New York City, East Coast, or maybe there's a way of packaging into a design competition and being part of that. And then that, instead of getting it sponsored by a company or grants, but you might be able to realize they'll grant you the opportunity to build a prototype. And that's what happened to these Team Tomato folks. They made the finalists, and they were granted to be able to travel to do more. So there's another type of, and it's also a great, I tell that to my students, it's a great opportunity for them to be able to develop their portfolios as well. So it's a hands-on or something that you could do and apply and it could get realized, or you can continue developing it. I think there's different forms for that available, especially in the remote world today. It's great that the people can hone in on particular aspects of things that is happening in Indonesia or Australia or elsewhere. The international thinking, I think, global thinking is important.
We have about 5 minutes left, so I just wanted to turn back to the audience and ask if there's any other questions. You can either throw it in the chat or you can just unmute yourself and ask our panelists or each other.
Could I ask something about, I just wanted to ask about the BIODESIGN. I'm fascinated by that. I think you mentioned, Alison, you mentioned something about BIODESIGN. I don't know, this is the way I took it, that there's no such thing as waste. So I'm, you know, I kind of understand that, but I wonder, I mean, the built environment that humans are working with creates a lot of waste. So is it mostly trying to from the ground up redesign waste, or to figure out what, if there's no such a thing as waste, like there's no such thing as weeds, I guess. Trying to figure out like how you can kind of repurpose, redirect that. That's one question. And then the other one is about the SCOBY. The way I understand it, I could be wrong because I haven't been keeping up with, is that a lot of the fashion that's associated with the SCOBY is that they're still trying to figure out the durability of it and the longevity of it. So it doesn't weather well with rain, or it doesn't actually last very long. It's a cool concept, but how does that, how do you kind of, because a lot of what we deal with in terms of trying to avoid toxicity is the, the glues and the various things that we put in there for durability, right? Has that advanced any?
Yeah, great questions. And I also know that we're running short on time, so I would be happy to continue this off. But yes, no, within our made world, there is definitely such a thing as waste. I feel like within the field of biodesign, when we're looking at how organisms in the natural environment, whatever natural is, basically that waste within that system can be turned into fuel that feeds some other type of organism. So it's more of a closed loop system. So I feel like a lot of what's happening within biodesign, especially within biomaterials, is we're trying to figure out how to make durable materials that we can grow to form, which minimizes resources and time and effort, that then once that's grown and used, that can then be potentially like composted back into the garden. So we're creating more of a closed loop cycle. Yes, and definitely with the SCOBY, it still has a long way to go. But actually recently, some students in the Biodesign Challenge have made some great strides with material research, which you can check out. But they've done a lot of work in tanning and waterproofing. So it's still not perfect, but it's making lots of strides.
Great. Glad to hear that, because I really am fascinated by the whole SCOBY thing.
Happy to chat afterwards.
Wonderful. All right. There aren't any other questions from the group. I always like to end on a question like this anytime I moderate a panel, because especially under non-pandemic times, the enormity of what we're all working towards, a more sustainable future by way of design, it seems like an insurmountable task. And I think we're often, both students and professionals alike, are often completely overwhelmed about the enormity of it. And so, I just wanted to sort of ask each one of you briefly to speak to how you keep hope alive and optimism and motivation to wake up every morning and continue this work when, we turn on the news and the world is on fire, literally and figuratively. So I thought, end on a high note. What keeps you motivated? What keeps you committed? And what gives you hope that we can and will prevail?
I can start. I guess I'd just like to mention right off the bat that the fact that this conversation is happening at all, and others similar like around the world are occurring, is cause for optimism. We have some momentum going, and we definitely need to keep it up. But panic and fear kind of don't have a place in maintaining momentum. It's not easy work. But in order to affect change, you kind of have to believe it's possible, right? Like the idea, in instructing, is to like open student eyes and, to the challenges, but also to galvanize them behind, becoming actionable. So that's how, I take that every day, into my courses, and, hope that, something comes of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that optimism is kind of required, like Dan said, for action. So it's part of the work to stay optimistic and maybe not I think there's the opposite of optimism in this case is not pessimism, it's fatalism, which means inaction, and inaction is the enemy. So optimism is sort of part and parcel of the project of sustainability and figuring out how to give people the means to feel they can take action. So to me, it's part of the work, and it's a requirement, I guess.
If I may add briefly, there's a beautiful and wise quote that I happen to agree with by Michael Beckwith, who said that every challenge offers the opportunity of becoming. It's a very powerful and true quote. Anyway, I happen to also teach meditation, and I just want to invite everyone who might ever feel overwhelmed to remember that the power of choice and the power of healing is always grounded or anchored in the now moment. So giving ourselves permission to still live very much in the present beyond the worries about the future. And I just really love this program, by the way, because it's definitely focused on empowering people to find creative solutions. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Joelle. Quickly, I can definitely add to this. Yes, this is a great question and really gets to the core of why we're here for this panel, and definitely zooming out on the problems. Problems related to climate change can be daunting. It's especially difficult now with all of the other emotional fatigue that's going on. And to be honest, I'm not really an optimist in general. I feel like I have learned optimism, and my collaborators and students give me optimism, which is lovely. So I try to repay that. But I also try to remind students and myself too, each time that I teach, that problems at times can seem insurmountable, but you have to realize that the issues of climate change and lots of problems are full of tiny little, like, millions of interconnected problems, both big and small. And so you're definitely not going to solve them all at once, but you can make a huge difference in one of those areas. Yeah, I feel like we have a bias that makes us think that large problems need like large responses, when in fact we can have different solutions at so many levels of scale. So yeah, but definitely my students give me optimism.
I totally agree with Alison on this one. Teaching gives me hope as well. And I think that there are only really two questions that people ever ask about sustainability. The first is, why does it matter? And the second is, what can we do? How can we help? Right? The first one is about the urgency, once you investigate that. And the second one is about the optimism, where to find that, how to act, how to make a difference. And every effort matters, right? We have these huge challenges that we can all kind of pitch in to confront. And as Joelle said, there are also creative opportunities, which can be inspiring, right? So I find optimism and hope from just finding joy in the doing and to keep going.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Tetsu. Yeah, please.
I like the team that we get to work together, and that gives me joy, and that gives me an uplifting feeling about this relationship between the colleagues, and the teaching course content as a way of platforms to be able to share and influence the next generation. We feel like being sucked into this vortex of multiple different things about the political leadership, the lack thereof, or the health or the crisis that is happening, but it will pass. And we just have to not panic and continue doing what we're doing and trying to influence and affect more people. And what I tend to like to do is to not be selective about the news and the media, which is, I'll be just careful about reading everything, and instead, find yourself in a campsite, be with nature a little bit, not just in a hippie sense. What I'm trying to refer to is somebody mentioned about indigenous culture, and back then the people had respected the nature, and we have to realign that kind of symbiotic relationship with Mother Earth, nature in some ways, because we don't own it, like people talk about air rights and ownership and economy and all these things, but at the end of the day, if we find a little bit more harmonious relationship, and that we are part of this food chain and we're not isolated, we don't own this thing, and that mindset attitude would switch and gives more hope and optimistic point of views, and finding a beauty. There are many beautiful things on Earth, and we just forget to pay attention to it. We get sucked into a television series or news, of somebody's interview. And it's like, I love days that we don't carry a cell phone, the vacation days when you feel good about ourselves, as well as being part of this world, is when you don't really carry your cell phone. You're off the grid and you're doing your own thing. And that's when you find some sort of whole. And if you're not happy inside, then we won't be able to help. So I think there's that dynamic, complex recipe to better and more optimistic future. That's what I think.
Great. I think that's a wonderful sentiment to end on. I think, it's a time of reflection and unplugging, and it's also a time for action, for lots of reasons. When I give my intro to sustainability lectures in our center, I always end with this quote by Einstein, because I think, especially within the context of sustainability within art and design, it's why Pratt has a sustainability center that is different than a lot of other colleges and universities. And the quote by Einstein is, "We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them." And really what that speaks to is there is a call to action and there is a call for innovation. And at least when I went to grad school to study design, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to design new things in a better way than what we had done before, and to solve problems than those who had come before us. And so I think that, going into this weekend and the next few weeks, especially leading up to the election, it's time for reflection, and it's also time for action, and calling on your internal designer to sort of bring that optimism into action. So I hope you all do that. Anyways, I really do appreciate you guys spending your Friday nights with us for what is turning out to be a wildly successful Pratt Earth Action Week. Again, the videos of all of the sessions will be available on our website just as soon as we can copy edit all of the captioning. And we are excited for what's next. We are excited for the continuation of this program, and to check back in with our student alums who are actually going and putting all of this amazing work into practice. And I'm looking forward to other opportunities for collaboration, both within Pratt and outside of Pratt, for this program, because I think that this is really just the beginning. So I thank you all for joining me. Thank you to our panelists. Thanks for Joelle and Tetsu for helping to coordinate this and to invite me. It was a pleasure being moderator this evening. So thank you so much.
Nice weekend, everybody.
Bye. Have a wonderful weekend, and I hope to see you in the flesh soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
I will stop the recording now.